Thanks for tuning into the podcast. I'm your host, Franco Perez.
This is where we show you the ins and outs and everything there is to know about mobile homes. It is truly our mission to transform lives through mobile homes. So thanks for watching Franco Mobile Homes.
And I'm excited to introduce to you our guest today of the podcast, James Broadhead, the founder of Offsite Focus. He's a specialist in consulting with a consulting firm that provides solutions to owners, developers, general contractors, architects, and policymakers. So he's very big in the prefabricated offsite construction industry. And James is going to talk to us a bit about his work, his expertise. And so stick to the end, and I'm excited to chat with you. Awesome to have you, James. If you could, James, tell us a bit about what got you into this industry, and what are you excited about this industry?
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you. And thank you so much for having me today. So, I've been in the built environment for the last 20 years. I've worked in different aspects of construction, everything from building envelopes to mechanical and electrical contracting. I've been in modular and offsite construction now for the last 8 years. I actually worked for a company that was moving into space rentals, and they wanted someone to help them on the business development side in British Columbia. And what I found through that process is that the advantages for offsite construction are definitely there when it comes to things like more permanent applications. But there's different ways that can enhance the construction process, and I wanted to explore it more. So from there, I went into working for a general contractor that specializes in permanent modular construction. And over the last year, I've been doing a master's in offsite housing construction from the University of Wolverhampton. So just really interested in the built environment, really interested in architecture, really interested in better ways to be able to do things. And to me, it's all around efficiency. So that's kind of been the progression that got me into this industry.
That's exciting, man. So if you could, for those that really don't understand modular construction, could you just briefly let us know kind of how that works and what is actual modular builds or manufactured buildings?
Yeah, it's a great question. So if you think about construction, it's one of the oldest industries, and it's an industry that really hasn't changed too much in terms of the way it builds. And there's a number of reasons for that. But if you think about the actual building process itself, you've got a number of different parts. So first and foremost, you've got the design process, which is really integral to actually making sure that the building is going to have the form, character, and the function that you're looking to try and achieve from that building. You've got the actual building process itself, which in a traditional process starts at the foundation. So all the excavation work that happens on site, and the building up of that foundation to grade, and then the structure is then built from that foundation onwards all the way through to completion. With a manufactured or an offsite process, there are a number of different ways to try and achieve the similar outcome when it comes to that actual building at the end. But what you're doing is taking a portion of that building and building it in a factory. So that can be everything from components. It can be anything from wall assemblies or roof assemblies. A lot of construction today uses different types of modern methods of construction. But when you start talking about modular specifically, you move more of that building into a factory process. So as the site's been developed, as that foundation is being developed and poured, at the same time, you're actually building those components in a controlled environment, in a factory, not too dissimilar to what you'd expect to see from something like an automotive process, in that it's getting built within that quality and that type of precision. Now, I don't want to mislead anybody that when you think of automotive processes, you think about robots, you think about high technology, you think about clean rooms, clean environments. Some elements of offsite construction can be that, but I suggest that's not quite as common. But the principles are similar. It's about precision, about quality, building within a controlled environment. And so that's kind of the process that you follow. And you can do that a number of different ways with different types of systems or components.
Really cool. So basically, for the listeners too, is it's what we're ending up with, what I see happening is we're taking regular construction and really kind of like that first assembly line for cars, right? And we're building these in very safe environments in a factory to make it way more efficient. And by doing that, we're able to produce it much faster and in a much more productive way. Is that what I'm hearing?
Absolutely. And so 2 points you made there. One was around efficiency, and then the other one is around that controlled environment and what that brings. So when you kind of reflected back to that example I was talking about of how buildings are typically built, you have to wait for that foundation to be completed before you start framing. Once you've finished your framing, then you start to work through each one of the trades. And that can be quite a lengthy process, but it's linear. One has to follow the other. But with off-site construction of different forms, because you're building in a factory at the same time, you're overlapping. You're doing it at the same time as the foundation is working. It's being poured. You're also building in the factory so that it comes together a lot quicker on the site. And so that's how you get in your efficiency when it comes to schedule.
Absolutely. And I love, I think construction is such a beautiful thing, especially any form of big development. It really is like a huge art. I consider it like an art and also like a team sport kind of thing. And you said a lot about how one relies on the other, and it's never just one company, really. We're working with several different vendors, right? You have the factory and the factory builders there, and then you have the foundation people, you have the transport people. You also have people that are dealing with the government permits, lobbying, making sure that all of that's going smoothly, and the designers and many different vendors. And it's like a sport. Everyone has their own position. Everyone's relying on each other. And it's really such a beautiful thing once it all comes together. It's so exciting to see these projects. And, So, is that kind of similar to what you see out there? Are there a lot of, is that how it works on your end too?
I wish it was as eloquently as you described it, Franco, because when you talk about the team sport, you talk about the collaboration, there's good teams, there's bad teams, right? And what I mean by that more is to do with the dynamics. And I think that construction is not too dissimilar. I think that one of the things which is unique to off-site construction is that you do have more stakeholders which are involved in the process, like you mentioned, in terms of transportation, installation. Some of these trades are very specialist, and so that's something to be considered. But if you've got a good team which is working well, part of that is that you've all got one goal in mind, you've all got one objective you're trying to achieve, you've got different plays to be able to get there, but ultimately you're working towards the same objective, and everybody knows their roles and their parts and what they bring to the team and what their job is. And I think to me that is when the team's working really well, then you're absolutely right. It's that team sport that's kind of working towards that singular objective, whatever it might be. And I think that that's an area that we see in other parts of the world where they have a defined structure, where everybody has a definitive role from the design team to the fabricators. Whereas I think that in the North American market, specifically in Canada, that fragmentation isn't always quite as cohesive as it could be. But when it is cohesive and you do have that collaboration, then you actually get the desired outcome that you're looking for.
Exactly. I want to talk a little, and we'll talk more about the construction process and that sort of thing. But I guess just for context, what do you see? I want to talk about the future a little bit. What do you see happening in the future, and why do you feel like this is becoming more and more popular, or more of the conversation, and why do you see and what problems are we coming across now, I guess generational and with the labor force that we should be worried about? How can we efficiently build? How do you see the future, James?
I think the future is going to be interesting, also quite exciting at the same time, especially for people which are within the industry, within the space. I think that there's some strong headwinds that are effectively there when we start talking about labour markets. I'm not an economist by any stretch, but you don't have to go too far to see that we've got an aging population. We have a lack of people coming into the trades. This isn't anything which is unique to the US or Canada. It's something that we're seeing on a global perspective. Population sizes are increasing. Immigration or migration is having large impacts on the built environment. And so all those things compounded mean that you're going to see not necessarily contracting of the labor force, but you're going to see a less available labor to do the type of work that we need when it comes to the built environment. So that's really going to be, I think, the biggest challenge that we need to try and overcome. And I had a really interesting conversation with a contractor where I was actually talking about this specifically. And the point I was making is that if you look at the construction industry, it really hasn't innovated in the last 20, 30 years. And their point was actually there has been a lot of innovation around sustainability, diversity ways from the construction site, around technology and improvements and safety, all of which are fantastic and valid points. And I commend the construction industry for the advancements they're making in those areas. But when you compare that to the internet, when you compare that to Uber, when you compare it to those types of applications that we're seeing, which are more technology driven, there's been a lot more advantages or innovations that have come from that process that have just really disrupted those industries to make them more efficient. And so I think that we're going to see a shift into looking for more innovation across construction, of which I think offsite construction is one of many different options that people could consider to try and make it more efficient. I don't think you're going to see the boots on the ground work going away. I just think that, when the guys are going out to pour the concrete, if they're pouring just foundations, for example, and not doing as much in terms of high-rise or mid-rise concrete structures, then you're using the same people to be more efficient in terms of being able to build more buildings to be able to yeah, you know where I'm going.
No, exactly. And to that point, you're right. How I see it as well is a lot of our skilled workers, the people that are doing the construction, they are now becoming at the age where they need to retire, and they're in their 50s or older. And that workforce is definitely needed for us to build housing. And on the opposite end of that, guys aren't really excited about using a hammer or a tool to start building, right? So we don't have a lot of people going into the industry. So it makes it so important for us to be more effective on how we streamline our processes of construction. And with that, what's happening in these factories, it's such a beautiful thing. I've been to these factories, and when you can really see the effectiveness of moving, the HVAC people are only doing HVAC, and they're able to work on multiple units at a time in an efficient manner without having to move their tools, without having to change locations and have any sort of nuances and that sort of thing. The efficiency is so much better in these factories. And you mentioned the controlled environment, not having to deal with the weather. That's a huge thing. And people don't also talk about the safety element for these workers as well. The amount of safety that they're able to have in these factories are so much better than what's on site. You can have harnesses that go straight to the ceiling. You also have all the tools and stuff that you need right next to where you're working. So the back and forth time it's way more efficient for those workers to be able to get the job done in an efficient manner. And because they're all in one building together, it's much easier to also regulate safety as well. Because when you have multiple sites or multiple construction elements happening on site, you really can't regulate or you can't always see what's going on, and you can't see that everyone's doing everything safely. So these factories, I hope we can play some clips of that too. But could you talk a little bit about that in the factory side of things too, and why it's so important that people see how these factories work?
Yeah, I think from a factory perspective, when you're talking about safety, when you are focused on that process of efficiency, safety is almost as much as it is a driving factor and a thought. It's almost a byproduct of the efficiency at the same time. And so what I mean by that is that obviously from a safety procedure perspective, they hold them everyone's held to a very high standard. There's lots of training which is involved too. But when you're ordering materials which are pre-ordered to the right lengths that you need, you don't have as many offcuts. You don't have those types of tripping hazards on the ground quite in the same way as you would with a conventional construction site. And in addition to that, you've got that repeatability of people doing the same job over and over again. I did a dissertation on this project specifically, on this subject specifically, around how to build affordable housing. It was focused on the Canadian market. But what I found really interesting is that when I spoke to different stakeholders, they all had slightly different perceptions of why certain outcomes were why they were. But they largely all agreed that the quality within the factory was a lot better than site built. And so, when you're building over the winter and you've got the elements, you've got the rain, you've got this affecting a lot of the wood. And let's be honest, in North America, everything under 6 stories is predominantly wood built. I think there are a lot of people looking at steel options, and they're looking also at different types of innovative methods and materials of building. But when you're building with wood outside and it gets wet, that envelope is getting closed up at some point, right? And so a lot of it has to be dried out to be able to make it a functioning building and reduce some of those challenges. But when you're building within a factory environment, to your point, that it's controlled and regulated in terms of the heat, the moisture within the wood they're bringing it in at a certain humidity, and that's typically not changing within those factory environments. So by the time it leaves, it's a covered, especially in a modular or in a panelized solution, you've got all the way out to the envelope's already typically built all the way to the exterior. They might not put the siding on, but they'll have the blue skin on. And when you start thinking about those types of things, that building is then moving outside, and it's covered and it's protected, or it's even been shrink wrapped before it's moving to the construction site. And so its exposure to the elements is a lot less. And so you got a safer building, a safer work site, and you get a better, higher quality. And the other point I want to make around the repeatability is that I was talking to an architect around their experience of working with different general contractors on-site and off-site. And we were talking about the repeatability that you get with a standardized type of product, and the same person who's doing the same job in a repeatable fashion, that they're going to be able to get that efficiency, and you get a much tighter tolerance because they're doing that repetition over and over and over again. So not only do they get good at it, they get really quick, and the chance of making a mistake is a lot less. Whereas in a built environment and on construction sites, every bathroom could be slightly different. Every wall could be a slightly different configuration. You don't get the same level of efficiency. And the point the architect was making is that actually, by having that efficiency on the construction site, no matter where it is, in a factory or site build, is actually better for the general contractor, but the architects might not be as interested in building that standardized, repeatable type of product, which is a bit of a barrier to adoption as well.
Exactly. And you're right. And what you mentioned about earlier too brought up a good point for me, is that, like you said, construction hasn't changed in several years. There really hasn't been much disruptive innovation around this. And especially because it's becoming more and more of a problem, affordability of construction is a huge issue now. Now, the reason why, one of the big elements of why housing is so expensive is because building these are so expensive. And those efficiencies that you're talking about, whether it's minor or major, really make a big difference of the end cost for that user, whether it's a senior person buying a home or a low-income family or a teacher trying to purchase a home.